it was easier to control my feelings and my fears. The problem was that I couldn't talk about it to anybody. But in between times, he was quite kind, and I had the feeling that perhaps he might alter, but it did worry me an awful lot then. The more I had to do in the way of work, the less my thoughts troubled me. It's quite clear that I wasn't born to work in a blacksmith shop. My job was quite different, but it was interesting to do entirely new tasks. I didn't really like being with women in the first place. I'd never played badminton in my life, but because I was young and healthy, I began to find some pleasure in playing games. I was quite surprised to find that in our new ward, not only were there decent baths, but we were allowed to bath in private and when we wanted to. Sometimes I could still hear the voice of Satan speaking to me. On wet days, we had to improvise, but there was no doubt at all that the more exercise I took, the better I slept. There were all sorts of evening classes. Most of them were about things I hadn't thought about since I left school, and sometimes I thought they were rather rubbish, but there was no doubt that they were rather fun at the time we were doing them. Do you see him over there? Look at him and tell me if you see what I see. Sometimes I wondered if it were true or if it were not true, but it was a horrible experience. Horrible. I never told her what worried me, but I think she knew. And when things were too bad, I had the feeling that she tried to shield me from harm. How nice to be treated as though I were normal, and how nice to be introduced by name. At times, my attention wandered, and when this happened, all my doubts and fears and thoughts about what I might have to do would come crowding back into my mind. But I did try to follow what the teacher said, and I found that I had remembered more of what I'd learnt at school than I thought possible. I could see some sense in this. When it was a visiting day, they didn't keep us in on the off chance of somebody coming. The visitors would come and find us wherever we were. And because my girl was good and kind and tried to understand me, she made friends with the nurses, and they too joined in and helped us both. I found it easier to be with her, with other people around, because if you are ill and have been away from home for a long time, a barrier does grow up, and to do a little work when visited and to be in the company of others who will talk a bit too does help to break the ice. Well, we all had to help. I don't suppose the hospital intended it to be a school for husbands, but we men did try to become quite useful and helpful, and the ladies certainly made us take more care of ourselves, and I think that we all became a little more helpful and considerate. Of course, we didn't live in this style at home, but it was rather pleasant to do things well and to clear things up properly. We used to work hard out of the ward, but during the meal breaks, the nurses who stayed in the ward would make a point of talking with us, and they wouldn't just go into a corner by themselves and ignore us. And when I look back, I think the nurses must have had a very hard day. I can't tell you what I owed to the nurses. I had to do some stupid things in hospital, but at the time I really did enjoy having to use my brain. Very difficult at times it was. We all had special jobs to do, and as we got better, we would look for things to do to help the nurses. And I think it must have made their life much more agreeable to be able to look upon us as friends. one time they thought my girl would never marry me, so they jokingly said I'd better learn to look after myself. Well, it is rather nice to be independent, but the trouble was that we couldn't always agree about the right way to do things. Three experts, and we all knew the right way. My girl didn't mind coming to see me in the ward. In fact, she got quite used to it until I was well. But after that, we used to go down to the canteen, and there we would talk to the other patients and to the nurses who came in, and it was much more like a meeting of old friends than anything else. You can't say that the nurses were exactly familiar, but we were all on very friendly terms. It was rather a peculiar thing to find that there were some things that I could do much better than the nurses. I was able to teach them the proper way to do some things. But I don't think anyone will ever get her to do this properly. No, I don't think so. I shall never forget the first time I went home for the weekend. It really was marvelous. All was well. We were happy and were talking about arranging a date for the marriage, and the future all seemed cheerful. I hadn't got any fears. I don't mean that I'd forgotten what had happened or what I'd thought, but I knew, or at any rate I thought I knew, how to deal with my fears if they were to occur again. I think he has some doubts about the future, though I hope he's wrong. Here we are. We're just going to sit down again and have a chat and decide what we're going to do with our hospital. We've got to translate one or other of these films into real life. Are we going to choose the first film or the second? It shouldn't take much discussion, should it? the voice of the bard, who present, past, future sees. I dreamt a dream, what can it mean? Piping down the valleys wild, piping songs of pleasant glee, on a cloud I saw a child, and he, laughing, said to me, "Pipe a song about a lamb." So I piped with merry cheer, "Piper, pipe that song again." So I piped, he wept to hear, "Drop thy pipe, thy happy pipe. Piper, sit thee down and write, in a book that all may hear." And I wrote my happy song, every child may joy to hear. While our sports shall be seen on the echoing green, the sun does descend, and our sports have an end. Round the laps of their mothers, many sisters and brothers, like birds in their nests, are ready for rest, and sports no more seen on the echoing green. I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green, and the gates of the chapel are shut, and thou shalt not writ over the door. So I turned to the Garden of Love that so many sweet flowers bore. When the voices of children are heard on the green, and laughing is heard on the hill, my heart is at rest within my breast, and everything else is still. Then come home, my children, come, come, leave off play, and let us away. No, no, let us play, for it is yet day, and we cannot go to sleep. Besides, in the sky the little birds fly, and the hills are all covered with sheep. by came an angel who had a bright key, and he opened the coffins and set them all free. Youth of delight, come hither, and see the opening now. They stumble all night over bones of the dead, and wish to lead others when they should be led. Was on a holy Thursday, their innocent faces clean, the children walking two and two in red and white and blue. Oh, what a multitude they seemed, these flowers of our town. Seated in companies, they sit with radiance all their own. The hum of multitudes was there, but multitudes of lambs. Thousands of little boys and girls raising their innocent hands.